Dear Lady Liadrin, in your elvish radiance, please look down upon our enemies and smite them with the full fury of your mighty chin. Amen. What do you mean that's not how the pray system works? What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Sounds Good Makes Sense, a discussion show for the World of Warcraft player and so on. My name is Devilor, and we need to talk about just what the heck all happened with that midnight reveal. Now, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't even sure I was going to end up making this video. And that's just because, like, I actually tried to make this last week, and I was sitting down trying to say, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start putting all my notes together. I need to find, like, where's all the info so that I can make sure I'm not missing anything important or anything like that. So I'm like, okay, let's find all the videos and stuff that have been out. Let's find all the articles and everything. And I was having the hardest time actually finding much in the way of solid concrete information about Midnight. So I'm sitting there like, man, am I just completely out of touch at this point? Like, at this point, this is last week. I was like, man, I haven't heard that much about what's going on in Midnight. And I didn't like try to watch the panels live or anything. Haha. Spoilers, we'll come back to that. I didn't end up trying to watch the panels live or anything. So I'm like, man, what all did I miss? What is going on? Why am I not getting all this information? Am I just completely out of, should I even be doing a WoW show if I'm this out of touch? And it turns out that was everyone's experience. For whatever reason, and we are going to get into that, this particular expansion reveal has been all over the place. Like, actually getting the information out there, getting a source of truth on anything that's happening, and just finding out what the heck Blizzard even had to say about Midnight at this big reveal event they were supposed to be having at Gamescom has been obnoxious. It's been ridiculous. Like, the source of information, that it's all coming from all over the place, and it's all scattered, and it's been very difficult to find, at least, you know, as of a week ago, any sort of like concrete list of details and information of what's going on with this expansion. And I am a little late to the party in making this video. A bunch of people have already put out their own videos talking about this, and I've watched a few of them. In fact, I highly recommend going and watching the Taliesin and Evitel video where they're talking about this, because they were actually there at Gamescom, and they have a lot of direct just being present at the actual show experience with what exactly went on. And so a lot of what I have now learned and some of what I'm going to talk about in this show, I actually learned from watching their video. So you should go watch it. It's a very good video. They're great people. Go watch their videos. But anyway, a lot of people have already given their takes, and I sat back and thought for a second, like, do I really just need to add to the pile of people dunking on the World of Warcraft Midnight reveal? And then I remembered that I actually worked on the team that was responsible for a lot of this stuff for 9 years. Like, literally all of the expansion reveals from Warlords of Draenor to Dragonflight, I had some amount of a hand in planning and announcement and all of the stuff that just happened recently. So I thought maybe there's some thoughts kicking around up in here that might be of interest to you. So here we go. As I mentioned, the biggest problem here has been that the information has just been scattered. It's been all over the place. It's been hard to find really anything. Like, there hasn't really been like a few sites, mostly Wowhead at this point, honestly, have been doing a pretty good job of trying to pull everything together and turn that into like the mega blogs and so on that we're used to. But finding the information at the time was very, very difficult. It was very scattered. It was it was difficult to even know where to look for a lot of this information. And sometimes it was even contradictory. Like, something was said over here and then was contradicted over here. Things like the names of certain zones being like referenced differently from time to time. Things like, is transmog free or not? Do we even know at this point? I guess it's not, but people keep saying that it is. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's just been contradictory and confusing and hard to find coming out of this. Why has this happened? I want to start by talking about one of the big things that caused an immediate issue with the way that information was coming out. And that was the fact that there was a big gap in time between the reveal of the cinematic and then the actual panel coming out. I think a lot of people were assuming, oh yeah, cinematic reveal. And then there was a features trailer that came out after that. It wasn't actually part of the reveal. You had to go to YouTube to find the features trailer. It was weird. But a lot of people were assuming, okay, cool, cinematic reveal is going to come out, and that's when the floodgates are going to open, and we're going to get a whole lot of details on the expansion. But not only was that not the case, in fact, the cinematic reveal was actually like several hours late from what I've heard. Not only was that not the case, that we didn't get a ton of, we got like little snippets of information immediately after the cinematic reveal. There was this features trailer, but it was just kind of just names of things on the screen, and you had to kind of guess what any of that was. And the real details didn't come out until later. Now, we're somewhat accustomed to that from previous years at BlizzCons and so on, where it'll be like, okay, here's the big reveal day one. Come back tomorrow for our deep dive panel and so on and so forth, where you're going to get a whole bunch more details. The problem here was it wasn't a comeback tomorrow. The cinematic reveal was on a Thursday. I believe it was a Thursday. As I remember, it was Thursday, or either way, it was not the day. It was not the next day. There was Thursday, and then it wasn't until Saturday that the panels actually occurred to describe a little bit more of that. And that amount of time in internet speak, in online social media speak, is approximately 7 decades. So here's the thing. People are willing to put a little bit of a delay on, oh, I guess we'll find out tomorrow. If it's the case of like, I've seen this, it's kind of the end of my day, I'm going to go to sleep, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and just be excited to learn more about whatever it was that was going on. When you put a whole day in between there, when there's that whole extra gap in there of extra time in between the initial knowledge and then the actual information coming out, that's when people start to speculate. And as I've mentioned on this show before, letting people speculate about something that you've only said kind of a tiny little bit about can really backfire. That can really blow up in your face, because if they see something and they go, that seems kind of lame, you then don't have the opportunity to prove otherwise. You don't have the opportunity to defend yourself. You're removing the ability for someone to have that reaction of, this looks kind of like nothing, and then be shown, okay, no, here's what you missed. Here's what you didn't know yet. Here's what's going on. Here's the actual meat of all of this. When you give people that span of time to sit there and wonder, is this something I'm even interested in? The answer is inevitably, for many people, going to be no. I don't have enough details to find out if I care about this, and I'm losing interest rapidly. And by the time you actually get around to sharing those information and sharing those details, they just don't care anymore. They're not listening. They've gone off somewhere else. But what was extra weird is during that gap of time, there were actually like interviews and so on that were occurring. There were essentially panels, even in some cases, that were occurring that were just not being put out anywhere. It was literally like stuff that was just for the people who were in attendance at Gamescom. And there's nothing wrong with, like, I'm not saying like, oh, the people that were attending Gamescom don't matter. But in this sort of a situation, when you're revealing a World of Warcraft expansion, you have to recognize that you are not only talking to the people that are at Gamescom. If you're trying to only talk to the people that are only at Gamescom, you're going to make a whole lot of people online feel like you are ignoring them. And then when it did come around to Saturday and these panels happen, apparently I didn't actually find this out until later because I was busy on Saturday. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to watch them live, even if they were live streamed, but apparently they weren't. Apparently they were just like recorded and then uploaded several hours later. And even then, like, some of the uploads had issues and needed to be taken back down and put back up again. And that's super weird. Like a bunch of, it was actually, again, referencing the Taliesin and Evitel video. Evitel apparently realized, like, partially into one of these panels that they weren't being live streamed. So she just started live tweeting as much as possible. And like, that was how people were finding things out about Gamescom. And here is one of the core rules of any sort of reveal for anything like this. Anytime you have a product, doesn't even matter if it's a video game, anytime you have a product and you are revealing this product to the world and you have an audience of millions that you are revealing this product to, you need to stay in control of your message. You need to be able to sit there and say, here is what we want you to know. Here is the information that we're presenting. You need to be very careful and curate how that's being presented to people, because otherwise, who knows what could happen as a result. Reading someone's live tweets of like, here's what I could manage to actually make my thumbs spit out in the 30 seconds before they went on to the next point and before I like needed to start another live tweet. Having that be the way that the majority of your people end up getting that information is insane. That's mind-blowing. And obviously they didn't like this was a surprise to Evitel as well. They didn't be like, hey, Evitel, do you mind? There was this, like, this wasn't their strategy, but their strategy was essentially to not have a strategy. That's even worse. Like being like, it's fine. We'll have this panel and then we'll upload it later. Like, no, No, someone gonna be sitting in that audience live tweeting this. You understand that, right? Like someone's gonna do this no matter what. This information will spread. And for the WoW community, I can tell you this, that information spreads very fast. People in the WoW community are very, very good at finding one shred of information and immediately 30,000 people have seen that in under 30 seconds. Like that is something that the WoW community is very good at. So for the approach here to have been, we'll upload the video of it later. We're not going to live stream this. We'll upload the video of this later. That is very much directly opening themselves to the possibility of this is exactly what's going to happen. Now, I do want to add one caveat here, which is the whole thing with the panels not being live streamed and then the videos taking forever to go up. This actually, there's a strong possibility that this is all on Gamescom. So typically the way that these sort of events work, there's two approaches to how having a stage at an event that is not your own event. So not a BlizzCon, having a stage at another event might work. One is that it really is like, here, this is your space, do whatever you want with it. If you need to bring in your own video production crews, go ahead and do that. We're just gonna give you this space and we're gonna leave it alone, and we're not gonna do anything else in there. That's all you. That is one way that often does happen. However, quite commonly, especially with the larger events, such as PAX, such as Gamescom, and so on, what actually occurs is they go, okay, we're going to set up this stage. You can decorate it. You can figure out a schedule for it. But we have our own team in place that's going to be handling all of the cameras and everything. We're going to be doing all the broadcasts. We're wiring everything up. We're miking everything. We're setting up all the speakers and such throughout the area. Because oftentimes at these larger events, they want to have control over how loud are you going to be, when exactly are the cameras going to be on you and where and so on. The event wants to have as much control over that as possible. And sometimes that's even part of the package. Like if you are spending the money to have this stage at the event, sometimes they just include the fact that you don't need to hire a production team, which then allows them to jack up the price of that quite a bit. So it is very possible. I've never directly worked at Gamescom, and the ones that I'm aware of, the last expansion reveal that was at a Gamescom, I believe, was Legion, and that was 10 years ago. So any knowledge that I would have specifically on how Gamescom operates is so outdated at this point that it's irrelevant. But I know that is how these sorts of things do sometimes work. So there is a strong possibility that the whole thing with Gamescom, with the panels not being live streamed, the videos of those panels taking forever and then having issues once they're uploaded and have to be re-uploaded and all of that nonsense, it's entirely possible that that's on Gamescom and that Blizzard is as upset as anyone about how that went. However, that's not a guarantee. That could well not be the case. It could have been a team that Blizzard had, it could have theoretically could have been a team of Blizzard employees that was trying to do this. More likely it was probably, if it was something that Blizzard put on themselves, it's more likely that it was a team they hired to come in and do this, at which point that team clearly dropped the ball. The other thing that is interesting to note about all of this as well is we were kind of missing our normal, like, extra suite of like blogs and supporting videos and so on that goes out that says like, hey, we just announced this expansion. Here is this feature. Here is this feature. Here is this feature. Like normally, at least in the past, especially the ones that I've been part of in the past, there would be like this whole schedule that was planned out of like, okay, we're going to have the expansion announcement. It's going to be at this time. We're going to post this blog then. Then 2 hours later, we're going to have this deep dive panel and we're going to post this blog then. Then there's nothing for the rest of that day and there's nothing going into the next day. But we're going to post 2 more blogs about different things in that span of time. And then by the time we get through the end of the BlizzCon at this 2-day event, there's been like 8 blogs that have been posted about different things related to this expansion. That's usually, historically at least, what's been done in the past. We got a few blogs this time, but they were mostly just like different ways to try and tell you to pre-purchase, which is probably a Microsoft pushing the pre-purchase thing as much as possible sort of thing. Obviously, Blizzard cares about people pre-purchasing as well, but the strategy there seems like everything that wasn't telling people to pre-purchase was less important. And there's been bits and pieces of that over the years, but it seemed really blatant this time around. Aside from that, we were missing a whole bunch of other, like there's another, like where are the blogs about new talents? Where are the blogs about the new Demon Hunter spec? Where is the updated new player experience? Like there's all sorts of stuff that could have used a blog that just kind of didn't. Now, in fairness, a bunch of the features, well, okay, one big feature, the housing, We already know a ton about the housing. We don't really need a new blog about housing to just tell us all stuff that we already know about it. There's a lot of information already out there about housing. I can see not wanting to do another housing blog as part of this. And looking at some of the other features, like Prey seems pretty limited as a feature. I don't know that Prey needs a blog about it. It's just kind of, there just kind of doesn't seem to be a lot going on. I actually don't really know what the point of that feature is. But aside from that, like, again, where new Demon Hunter spec, that should have a blog. There's apparently a ton of stuff going on with talents that sounds really interesting. That could have used a blog. Where is all the game information that's coming out of this? And the end result of not having all of that means that there hasn't been this like central source of truth. There hasn't been this like place you can go to be like, I want to know what's going on in this expansion. I want to know about all this information that they've just shared at this big reveal event, because they did share a bunch of information. I want to know what all that information is. There hasn't been a Blizzard sourced way to just go and look all of that stuff up. I should also mention that, like, a lot of times, especially around these reveal events, a ton of that information comes out through interviews. It isn't necessarily something that goes directly on a blog, but that's usually the case for, like, we found out a few more nitty gritty details about how this thing is going to work, but there was a blog that went over it in at least top level details already. It's been more of like the little things that is what comes out in interviews. And even then, this time around, the interviews have been messy and scattered, and half the time the articles are reporting on stuff that they just saw somewhere else. Like PC Gamer posted an article that was talking, I forget exactly what the topic was, but PC Gamer posted an article that was a reference to a Wowhead article that was a reference to something Annie Fuchsia heard from someone else and mentioned on her stream. And again, there's no shade on PC Gamer, no shade on Wowhead, no shade on Annie Fuchsia for any of this. That's just been the necessity with this release of trying to get information out, is the information is always coming through this like weird little daisy chain of, oh, I heard from this person, and then they said this over here, and we think this is probably true, but we don't have any way to know for sure. And part of the reason that that's been happening, just to be clear, is that a lot of it's become very clear that Blizzard's social media has been fully outsourced to an agency at this point. What they're doing on social media is, it's clearly not coming from inside the house. We'll put it that way. And there's a couple of reasons that we know that. One is just like the general quality has been weird, and there's been a lot of things that's like no one at Blizzard would have said to this. Like the funny example that I enjoy the most is the time that when Mists of Pandaria Classic released, they tweeted, "Welcome to the Timeless Isle," which was not out yet. They thought the Pandaren Isle was the time. Anyway, there's been a bunch of weird little things that have happened in the like video shorts and stuff that they've been putting out too. And also we know this because some of the former employees who were on the social media team have just straight up said it. Like, this is what's happened now. It's all been outsourced to an agency. So we're fairly confident that Blizzard is not running their own social media. At least WoW isn't running its own social media anymore. It's all been passed off to another team. And there have been agencies that do some really good work. There have been agencies that I've worked with in the past where I was like, yeah, that was great. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for putting this together. This is perfect. This is exactly what we needed. And I didn't have time to do this myself. So I'm glad that this exists. Like there are absolutely agencies out there that do good work, but it's never going to be as good as having someone who is directly inside of your company, having someone who is tied to the product and knows the product in and out, putting this stuff together. And so the result has been, there's a lot of info that's going out in like YouTube shorts and TikToks and so on, where it's like, oh, here's this cool new thing that you can learn about what's going on in Midnight. But you have to like sift through all these different shorts to get all that information. And half the time the shorts are like titled things that have nothing to do whatsoever with what's actually going. So they basically, it's the difference between creating content for engagement and creating content to be informative. Making content that is meant to be like a quick, easy, like YouTube short bite of information is really great for like keeping people interested in your product, giving people fun things to share with their friends and being like, haha, did you see this thing? It was so funny and so on. It's not a great way to get details about upcoming changes to your World of Warcraft out there. It's not, not a great way to share that information. So what kind of seems like what happened here is Blizzard got rid of their social media team, brought in an agency to do social media. The agency, the social media agency, they're immediately going to start looking at their metric for success. They don't actually care whether or not people are understanding what's going on in these videos. All they care about is, do the numbers go up? Am I going to put out a video and it gets a whole bunch of views? So they're creating these videos from the perspective of, I just want this to be something that people will share to other people, which, sure, if it's something where it's like Ian Hazakost just saying in a random interview, yeah, and by the way, we decided to delete night elves in this expansion. Like, yeah, people are going to share that like crazy, but that's an awful way to get information like that out there. And in the past, Blizzard's approach has been, okay, let's have social media experts in-house. You can still hire an agency in those situations. If you're ever like, dang, we really need someone that knows the absolute crap out of putting a whole bunch of YouTube shorts together and getting those, that's a very important. We need a ton of YouTube shorts to go out. You can still hire an agency to do that for some amount of money or whatever. But Blizzard's current approach, probably by mandate of Microsoft, is don't have anyone internally at all and exclusively hire external agencies to do all of it. That at least seems to be what's going on. Because after all, why would you pay a social media manager, I don't know, 80 to 120K a year? Why would you pay a person to do that and handle all of this stuff and know what they're doing, when instead you could pay an agency like 400 to 800K to do a worse job? Why? That's just simple math. Why wouldn't you do that? Okay, there is actually an answer to that question, and it's stupid. Here is the dumbest thing about how corporations tend to work. This isn't even a Blizzard specific problem. Every large company I've ever worked for has had some measure of this exact issue. And I'm sure there will be lots of people that can commiserate as I explain this. Funding tends to go into different buckets. When your company gets big enough to where they have to start addressing like, okay, how much of our overall, what is our budget this year? And let's separate that out into these different buckets that then define what that's all going to be used on. So what happens is they say, okay, we have decided to set aside this amount of funding for paying employees and hiring and so on. This is our budget part of the budget that's set aside for paying people. This is our part of the budget that's set aside for marketing. And then there's obviously going to be other buckets as well, but those are the two that are important for this discussion. Because what happens so often in that situation is you'll be sitting there like, we really want to hire more people to do this, or we really don't want to lose people to do. We want this to be something that's in-house, but we don't have the approved budget for hiring people to do this job. We have these jobs have been removed and that budget has not been expanded to allow us to hire new people. And that would be stupid if they did that anyway. It would be completely believable, but it's still stupid. So you look at it and you say, well, we don't have the 100K to pay a social media manager, but over here in our marketing budget, we have $2 million just sitting around that we can do whatever we want with. So we literally do not have the ability, because of how corporate structures tend to work. No one's going to approve saying, yes, let's spend 100K this year on hiring a social media manager. But instead they will approve, yes, let's spend 500K on doing something that a social media manager could do in a third of their weekly, whatever you want to call it, weekly responsibilities. It's dumb and I hate it, but that's how it works. That's what corporations do. It's stupid. But now we're coming around to the core of the issue and why I, as well as many others, believe that the Midnight expansion reveal was so sloppy. Layoffs. Now we know in recent history, Microsoft did a big round of layoffs. They laid off 9,000 employees. I have choice words that I would say about that, but I'm trying to keep this show family friendly. So we're just going to leave that as Microsoft laying off 9,000 employees. We'll ignore the fact that they also have like record profits and all that. That's not important. Anyway, Microsoft laid off 9,000 employees earlier this year. Many of those were inside of Blizzard, and many of those inside of Blizzard across the whole company, but including inside Blizzard, that disproportionately affected people in what is called soft skills, things like communication and so on. It's not necessarily something that it's a relatively vague term of like what's a soft skill versus a hard skill, but something like a software engineer, like, do you know these programming languages? Do you know how to create that? Do you know how to interface with a database like this and so on? That's considered a hard skill in the tech universe. Talking about all of that stuff to people is considered a soft skill. And so these layoffs disproportionately affected more people in those quote unquote soft skills. This is something that's an industry-wide problem. People tend to consider those skills to be less important because, and it's not an entirely unfair, I will say, it's not an entirely unfair assessment. It's hard to bother paying people to talk about your game if you don't have the people to make the game in the first place. I can talk, I promise. But this is something across the industry where those roles are devalued significantly more than any amount of that hand waving I just did does not make up for how devalued those roles are in the industry. So we know that the social media team at Blizzard is pretty much gone. I don't know if there's any social media people at Blizzard still, or if it's all fully outsourced. It might still have some people that are working at Blizzard. All the ones that I know that were doing social media at Blizzard are gone now. There's others that have been inside the publishing roles that have been let go. I'm sure there are some of the people who previously would have been handling things like live streaming and the video production and so on. I'm sure some of those have been let go as well. A lot of people have been lost from Blizzard, and this all happened relatively recently. It was just a couple of months ago. So this is the sort of thing that it came as a surprise to many of the people inside of Blizzard. They were planning on being able to do a lot more than they did, and then suddenly they had to do all of that with fewer people. Yes, there are probably a lot of decisions that were made after that about things that were happening at this Gamescom reveal, but the decision to have this reveal be at Gamescom was probably made 6 to 8 months ago. It was a while ago that decision would have been made, because that's how long ago it has to have been to start that runway of getting everything in place and like confirming with Gamescom, yes, we want this stage and so on and so forth. Like all of that had to have been done ages ago. So a lot of this work was stuff that the communications team was already signed up for, and then they lost people that were going to help them make that happen. And you might be thinking, okay, well, they lost the social media team, but that doesn't explain why the blogs weren't there, or that doesn't explain why all this and that, like these other weird things that happen. That doesn't explain why there was that one weird blog that had the same like description, basically copied and pasted 4 times and changed a couple of the words. I'm going to get brief aside on that, by the way. A bunch of people have called that AI. There's no way that was AI. That is almost, I would bet money that what that blog was the writer of those blogs. And if it's the person that I think it is, that person would never have let that go out like that. But it's almost certainly the writer of those blogs was just blocking out the blog and was like, okay, this is where I'm going to have the description of these different zones. I'm just going to plug this in here, and then I'll copy and paste the first one a few times, and then we'll get this set and ready to go once I have the details on these other zones. And then that person got pulled in 43 different directions because so many people got laid off, and then just wasn't able to get back around to fixing that blog. And so it probably at that point was someone going, oh crap, we're about to post this, and it just says the same zone 4 twice. Here, let me real quick just plug in some other things and we'll push it and we'll go live. That's my guess on what occurred there. Either that, or it was something that it got set up and it was like, okay, we're going to have to come back to this and fix it later, but I don't have time right now. I need to get these other things done. Anyway, I don't think it was AI. I think that was literally the cause. It was literally caused by someone not having time to do it right. Because the reality is, around events like this, it almost doesn't really matter that much what your actual job role is, what your actual list of normal duties on a week by week basis. I said duty on a week by week. I'm an adult on a week by week basis. I'm 42 years old, nearly. Dang, that's real soon. Crap. Anyway, it almost doesn't matter what your list of responsibilities is on a week by week basis when it comes around to big events like this, big reveals like this, because there's so much stuff that needs to be done that everyone just kind of ends up sharing the load a little bit. Everyone ends up kind of taking bits and pieces off of other people's plates and going, okay, our blog writer has 4,000 blogs that need to get written in the next 3 days. That's insane. Here, influencer manager, you have written before, right? Here, write a couple of blogs. Literally, that has happened around expansion reveals in the past. I was the influencer manager and our blog writer was overworked And I was like, I've got a couple of hours today that I don't have anything booked. I can get that done for you and I can help out in this situation. That's the sort of thing that happens all the time. Sometimes it's even from other teams. Like occasionally, like the Hearthstone team would help us out with things, or the Diablo team would help us out with things, or vice versa. We would help other teams out with things because it's like they've got a big reveal going on and they need some help. So we're going to help them out because we can, because that's how these teams tend to work. So the problem is, when you lay off an entire social media team, not only do you now not have someone in-house handling your social media, but you now don't have that person there anymore, that anyone else on that communications team can go, hey, I really need some help getting this finished. Can you help me out for a minute? And that's the sort of thing that people up at the top, the corporate people, they don't tend to think about that because they haven't lived it. But when you are in the trenches, as it were, in those situations, and you're coming up on these events, you know everyone there is working probably 14 to 16-hour days the entire time. What inevitably happens is some of those responsibilities get shared around a little bit. It's like, okay, this person on this team is underwater and needs help badly. I am also underwater, but I can get a little breath in right around 3 p.m. today. Does that work? Great. Yeah, perfect. You can handle this thing. That's on you now. You can get that done. This is now one less thing this other person over here has to deal with. So combined with the fact that a lot of the people that needed to do those things in the first place were just not there anymore because of the layoffs, it also means on top, like just the absolute worst timing, dumbest time. There's never good timing for a multi-billion-dollar corporation to do layoffs. They just don't stop that. You don't do that. But if you had to pick timing 2 months before an expansion reveal, that's not it. That's bad. And so I believe that is the core of a lot of all the just weird, why is this like this, that's been happening around the midnight reveal, where it just genuinely seems, to me at least, like this is the result of a team that was already going to be massively overworked, because we always were already going to be massively overworked during this time frame, now having less people to help share that burden. And also some of those responsibilities now has to be handled by somebody else, because I promise whatever agency they hired to come in and do social media wasn't thinking of literally every single other thing that needs to go out during this time period, because it's all part of a different strategy. And I'm going to stop ranting about that specific aspect of it. This is definitely the sort of case, at least to me, very clearly the sort of case where the fact that they just had fewer people, full stop, doesn't even matter what their actual role was at the company. The fact that there was fewer people to be able to make this thing come together cleanly is why it was such a mess. And the extra gravy on the cake here, is that a saying? Gravy on the icing on the, I don't know. The extra gravy on the, I put gravy on my cake now. The extra gravy on the cake here is that Midnight actually looks really good. Like the housing still looks amazing. The transmog updates with some confusion around them still sound excellent. The new UI stuff they showed was great. Like the boss timeline looks wonderful. It's exactly what I was hoping it was going to be. The nameplate stuff, that looks really, really good. The new Demon Hunter spec sounds very interesting. I'm looking forward to trying it out as soon as we can get some access into the alpha or whatever. The prey system, the revamped Silvermoon and Eversong Woods. I'm a huge Blood Elf fanboy, so I'm really looking forward to the revamp of Silvermoon. Apparently they're simplifying professions, so that's really cool. Thank God they're actually going to simplify professions a little. I'm hearing that they're getting rid of some of the useless extra tiers that no one ever wants anyway. Cool. Yes. This all sounds like a banger of an expansion. I really wish the reveal had been good. It's so hard to be excited about all of this new good work, this new exciting stuff that if someone comes up and tells you about it, you're like, dang, yeah, actually that sounds great. It's so hard to actually be excited about that stuff if you have to dig so far to find out about it in the first place. And to me, and I know this is a broken record with me, I'm constantly saying stuff like this because I truly believe it, but this time I extra doubly super truly believe it. This really feels like Microsoft screwed Blizzard over on this reveal by doing this layoff and making this be an absolute mess for the people that were trying to make this reveal happen in the first place. I have zero blame whatsoever to throw on any of the people still at Blizzard who were trying to put this whole thing together, because I don't think it was their fault. I think what happened here is they had help and they had ideas and they had a bunch of stuff they wanted to do, and then they lost a bunch of that help, but still had committed to doing it anyway. So they just had to kind of try. And frankly, they pulled it off better than they probably should have. Anyway, that's going to wrap up this rant for today. Thank you so much for sticking through it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really, really do appreciate it. Super shout out to my patrons. Thank you all so much for sticking with me, even when my upload schedule has been sporadic. I really, 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 truly appreciate all of that. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can head over to patreon.com/Devilor. Take a look over there. There's a couple of neat perks that you get. But definitely, please do go check that out. Patreon.com/Devilor. I really, really, truly appreciate it. You can also buy merchandise like this hat that I'm wearing. Devilor.com. Go and check that out. And also keep an eye out for live streams. I am still live streaming on my Twitch channel, but I've also started live streaming once again on the channel that this show was on previously, youtube.com/Devilor. We're going to have a streamathon coming up here real soon. So I'm in the planning stages for that. I'll have more details on that soon. But should be a lot of fun. We always have a lot of fun little extra challenges and so on that we do throughout the streamathon. So it should be a really, really fun time. But that's going to wrap it up for me. Thanks again so much, everyone. Really appreciate y'all being here. I'll see you later.